So I decided that for my science literature search paper, I would talk about meditation and anxiety and depression. So the question that I kind of came up with, this was not the original question, but I eventually led to that. So how has meditation helped perinatal women dealing with depression or anxiety? And so, in order to understand this study, you first have to understand what perinatal means. And the Google definition is relating to the immediate weeks before and after giving birth. But in this study, that definition is used a bit differently. So, perinatal status is defined as preconception, during pregnancy, and postpartum. So, I was a bit interested in this just because I don't relate to this, but my sister went through some sort of um, issue with this, so I just found it interesting because it's actually a pretty quite common thing to happen. Usually, women who after they give birth, they have some sort of anxiety or depression, but it's most common for people who have previously been diagnosed with anxiety or depression. So also there's a lot of like acronyms. So MBCT is mindfulness based cognitive therapy. MDD is major depressive disorder, and BSD is bipolar spectrum disorder. Oh yeah, oh yeah, and the study decided to add people in women in preconception stage just because they have to be actively trying to get pregnant. So whenever they decide that they want to become pregnant, sometimes they take medication, and that might affect the study. So the study that I found was mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for prenatal women with depression or bipolar spectrum disorder. That is David Nowicz, and he was the lead researcher in this study. The study came out in 2015, and I believe was cited 34 times. Um, he is affiliated with UCLA. He's a professor there, but he has done research at Oxford. Uh, so the whole point of this study was to examine whether there would be a positive improvement or no improvement after MBCT, and in women who have been struggling with some sort of depression disorder or bipolarism disorder. So in order to select these participants, women had to meet certain criteria, and so they had to be, like I mentioned, the three stages at the beginning. They either had to be pregnant, but it could not be more than 32 weeks pregnant. They could be in the postpartum section, but only 1 year after postpartum, or just not pregnant but actively seeking to conceive a baby. They must have also been diagnosed with some sort of bipolarism or depression, and then obviously spoken red English and 18 years or older. Um, so this is kind of like a figure of how basically they were um, screened. So at the beginning, there was 101 women who were screened, but a lot of them were excluded because they didn't meet the certain criteria. And then after that, 49 women consented and completed the baseline assessment, but some of them didn't meet the baseline requirements. So basically, in the end, 32 completed a 1 month follow-up assessment after the 8 week long program, and then 31 attended a 6 month assessment. And so, what this 8 week long study consisted of was learning about what MBCT is and its relevance to depression and bipolar disorder. And they did that by using body scans, sitting meditations, and mindful yoga. Um, and then after that, in the last couple of weeks in the study, they became aware of relapse signs and how to prevent those from happening, or like at least moving past those. Um, and so the study was measured by consumer acceptability, symptom severity, recurrence of major depressive episodes, and daily mindful tendencies. And this was through questionnaires and critical assessments by the people that were doing these trials. So the results, kind of big, but we're going to focus on this. And you can tell that in the baselines, so these all are two different sort of scale. All of those are different scales for depression, for mania rating scales, and for mindfulness. Um, so if you just focus on these, you can see a significant change between the BSD and the MDD. So people who had obviously major depressive disorder were twice as likely to rank than people who had bipolar spectrum disorder. Also, people who in the Young Mania Rating Scale, um, people in the bipolar spectrum disorder were likely to rank higher than the people who have depression. And so, also, this graph I really enjoyed it because it was very simple to follow and like it basically summarized the whole article. Um, the graph on the left basically shows the sort of depression levels or scores that people rank themselves. And before the 8 week long program, it was pretty high, and then after it was pretty low. And then after they checked in 1 month and 6 months after, you could tell that in this after 6 months, the depression did rise, but it was not as high as before the 8 week long program. The graph on the right shows basically mindful tendency scores. So as it's increasing, it's showing that the depression, it's not going away, but they're handling it in a better manner. So they at first they didn't really handle it properly, and then like over time it increases, which is good. So in conclusion, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is a positive treatment for women, perinatal women who are um, struggling with depression, and because oh yeah, but it was also inconclusive for people who have bipolar spectrum disorder. So although the study was trying to figure out the difference between those two and trying to increase um, a better treatment for both, because of low rates of the treatment, like people dropped out that had BSD, and they just didn't follow up with the program. So some of the limitations of the program or the study were that the study was pretty small. So overall, it didn't necessarily like help everybody, and a lot of the people, 58% of bipolar spectrum disorder people, women, um, ended up not completing the program. So overall, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is really good for treating depression, but there really isn't enough data to say the same for bipolar spectrum disorder.
Yes. You go back to the so like for that one after 6 months goes up in part because of the low completion results, or is that the practice?
I think it's more like not that it's not. Mm, so that's a really good question. But I think it has to do more with like after a certain like time, like there's more issues. Like there was like in regards to the limitations, this study didn't take into consideration like the like life stages in their whatever was happening, their if they were married or not, and they had issues. So um, this kind of figure is a bit flawed just because it doesn't incorporate those factors. But I'm assuming it's the latter.